Hello, Flawless family. I am so happy to be joined here today with Carol Galanty, who has spent much of the past decade inspiring people to create life-lasting positive change in their lives. Carol is a multi-talented person in the wellness area. She's a health supportive chef trained by the National Gourmet Institute in Manhattan, a certified holistic health counselor, doTERRA wellness advocate, and a yoga instructor. She teaches people to use food as medicine to live a healthy, disease-preventive lifestyle. So thank you for joining us, Carol.
Thank you for having me, Trey. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, of course. So I always like to start with this question. It's really been a super tough year. So I want to ask, how are you really and truly doing right now?
It really has been a difficult year. And it's so funny because I say the same thing when I'm talking to people like, no, how are you really doing? Because we're so programmed to say, oh, yeah, everything's great. Everything's great. It's been a challenging year for sure, both on a personal level and a professional level. And then just the whole collective of what's going on in the world. But it's really forced me to reevaluate things in my life and reprioritize, figure out what's really important to me. I think my theme this year has been quality over quantity. And that's, that carries through for everything. I've been spending a lot of time downsizing and simplifying with possessions, material possessions. I feel since I'm in my home more and I moved to a smaller home, like clutter makes me feel stress. So I've just been removing as many things as possible and just simplifying and doing that with everything, even my diet. Just going back to really simple things that make me feel and function at my best. But quality over quantity for sure, simplicity, and and just feeling like focusing on things that are self-sustaining, like growing a garden, anything that can bring me happiness and make me feel like I'm in control of my life. Because with all the uncertainty going on in 2020, it's been a rough road for a lot of people.
It certainly has been, and I love all of the healing and really self-care stuff that you're doing for yourself, and appreciate your honesty. But something that you didn't mention was, it's been a tough time for everyone, and especially in your personal life. Now you have a truly just amazing story, just with everything going on, and especially with your mom. So, would you mind telling us a little bit more about, your mom's story and what's been happening? Because it's been such a tough time for the older adult population.
Sure. Yeah. So right around the time when COVID was first starting out, we had just a lot of upheaval in my life. My mother had a stroke in February, and my parents lived in Arizona. I live in New York, so we always have that distance issue. But my mother had a stroke. My father ended up catching the flu while he was visiting her in the hospital, and so I flew out there and was juggling going between the hospital and the rehab center. And during the course of all that, my father passed away. So I moved my mother into assisted living. It was meant to be a temporary situation. And I flew back to New York, and then COVID lockdown happened. And so now there's my mother living alone in assisted living in Arizona, and it was weighing very heavily on me. So so the isolation, her being there by herself, and then with the dementia, it was a really challenging situation. So the idea of going to get her out it was a difficult decision because there were so many factors involved. I was faced with the dilemma of, do I put an elderly person at risk flying her from Arizona to New York in the middle of a pandemic, or do I leave her alone and God forbid she gets sick there? What would happen? All those stories I've been hearing of the elderly people who were sick and then they go into the hospital and the hospitals weren't allowing family in. And to me, what has happened to these elderly people dying alone is just the biggest travesty of this whole thing. So that's how it all started.
Right. And I mean, wow. First of all, just thank you so much for being, authentic with me and feeling comfortable sharing that story, because I can imagine, that's not easy. So definitely appreciate that. But how do you manage to, like you said, like, because you want to be protected to your mother and whatnot, like you're thinking about how I don't want to put her on a plane. What are you doing to try to stay connected, and just to be there for her and whatnot? And like, how do you manage that for yourself?
Well, while she was away in assisted living, we would try to stay. I mean, I was out there getting her settled, and in person, I feel is always best for the connection. But when I came back to New York, we stayed connected with phone, FaceTime. We would have the aides that worked there. We would do FaceTime calls with the kids, and my mother really enjoyed that. But I feel like it really is that face-to-face, that in-person connection is something that you can't really duplicate. And when I was weighing the risk factor of bringing her home versus her staying there and being isolated, I feel like that connection is so important for all of us. Isolation is very detrimental to our emotional health and well-being, but especially for an elderly person. I mean, my mom gets such joy out of being, like, when you walk in the room, if she sees somebody she knows, she gets such joy out of that. And like I said, quality over quantity for me is very important, like quality of life. And so I feel like that isolation was very harmful. So so I had to weigh a few different factors of figuring out what I thought was most important, and I wanted to address that. She needs to be around family. So
I 100% agree with that, and I love hearing that from you. We also learned that from someone else that we recently had a conversation with, who has a whole organization called Love for the Elderly. So,
oh, really?
so I appreciate you opening up and sharing your story, because right now there's a huge focus of Flawless as we just try to do a lot of what you're doing right now, and that's share love and share connection with our elder adults. So thank you for leading by example. And everything that you've been saying so far, that you've been proving how great of a healer that you've become. So I kind of want to touch more on that. And what is the source and the inspiration for you dedicating such a huge part of your life to not only learning how to heal yourself, but to heal others? Like, I would love to hear more about your story.
Well, it all started about 20 years ago when I was in my early 30s. I grew up without any kind of a connection to what I ate and how it affected my health. I just was like a junk food junkie my whole life growing up. And that caught up to me. And in my late 20s, early 30s, I started to develop a lot of health problems. And just a long story short, I discovered that the page-long list of symptoms that I had went away in about 3 weeks once I completely changed my diet. And that to me was a big eye-opening moment, and it sparked this whole journey that I've been on. So I was inspired to go back to school to learn more about nutrition, because I had lacked the mindset. I was like, wow, I can change the way I feel by what I'm eating and drinking. To me, it was like, that was revolutionary. I didn't know. So I went back to school for nutrition, and then later on, and I started health coaching, and then I just added layer upon layer. It all started with food and the diet. But then I, eventually went back to culinary school to learn how to use food as medicine. I went to a school that taught health supportive cooking techniques. Then I went and became, got certified in yoga, and then I learned about essential oils. So I've just been adding layer upon layer onto, it's a lifelong journey. And I'm going to continue to add layer upon layer as I go on. But that's what sparked it initially, was me discovering that I could change the way I felt by changing my lifestyle, by changing my diet. So it all started there.
And so what I want to know now more so is living and teaching this daily detox lifestyle and this plant-based diet, combined with your essential oils and just living an overall high quality, and the effective supplementation that goes with that. So if you're giving advice to somebody that wanted to take steps, right? And you're the expert here. So just thinking someone on a general level, someone like me, for example, if I wanted to take these steps to live a lifestyle for you, what are some of the first general changes I would have to make in my life or in my diet that you give? What are the first groundbreaking steps?
Well, it really depends on the person that I'm talking to. So I always set up an initial call with somebody just to find out where you're at, because everybody is completely different. We're individuals, and there is no one size fits all approach to diet or lifestyle. So I want to get to know you. I want to get to know what your diet's like, what your lifestyle's like, everything about you, and find out what your biggest challenges are and what you want to change. And then we just start with one thing, or maybe one or two things, and you start to add in a healthy new habit, make it a habit, and then we add another healthy new habit in, and we just add layer upon layer, so it doesn't, because you want it to be sustainable. If I went into a meeting with you and I said, okay, Trey, you're going to make these 10 changes. We're going to overhaul your diet. You're going to do this. You're going to start yoga. You're going to start breathing techniques and everything. It would be too overwhelming. And I don't want to set you up for failure. I want to set you up for success. So you start with manageable steps that somebody can take. And then once they start feeling well and you feel more energy, you're feeling good, you're more motivated and inspired to take on another change. You actually want to. And your cravings for things, like as far as diet goes, your cravings for the bad stuff starts to diminish, and you start to actually crave healthier food and healthier drinks, and you start to care more about what you're putting in your body. So it's always a gradual step and always a gradual process, and it's always tailored to that individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so for my mom, for example, when I brought her home, one of the main reasons I wanted to bring her home from the assisted living was that I could have control over what she's eating and drinking. Because I know in a facility like that, they're making one meal plan, they're sending it to everybody, they're not tailoring it to her specific needs. And unfortunately, budget comes into play in these facilities, and they're not getting the highest quality food. So the first thing I wanted to do was change her diet. And it was, when you have somebody who's been eating a really poor diet for a long time, I definitely have my work cut out for me on that aspect. But that's where the first thing to do, especially when you want to improve brain function, is to heal the gut. So if you have somebody coming to you, like, so my mom arrives with dementia, I want to improve her cognitive function. But I'm first going to focus on, let's heal the gut. Let's focus on the digestive system because of that gut-brain connection. So that's what our first step was. And removing sugar and processed foods is number one. Sometimes it's what you're not eating is more important than what you are eating. So just for some people, just that one step is going to be a huge change for them, and they're going to feel so much better, because most people survive on processed foods and sugar, which is not good for our brain function, not good for immune system, just not good overall.
You're definitely right, and I'm so glad that you immediately transitioned to your mom, because that's where I was going next. I understand that like you said, it's probably different for everyone, but just understanding how important your story is with your mom and how important this information is for our old adult population. So I'm glad that you've already went through that experience, that thought process with your mom. But is it any different or is there like a general advice that you would give to an elder population or to somebody who would want to do the same thing you did with your mom? Is there a general advice that might be different for that older population than, like you said, for someone like me on the younger side?
Yeah, generally, someone older like this, a lot of times the elderly people have a more compromised, digestive system. So if we're just talking about that part alone, you want to go slow and gradual. Like, I wouldn't bring my mom home and put her on a all raw vegan diet. Like, it would just be too different from where her starting point was. So things like healing soups, they're pureed, they're cooked, they're very nutrient dense, but they're easier to digest than something like a raw salad, for example. And just take a lot of times the elderly population are on limited budgets, even whether they're living alone or in an assisted living, and budget comes into play with what they're eating generally. So unfortunately, the way our food system is set up, the more expensive foods are the healthier foods. So you'll find a lot of people, like my mom and dad, used to eat really healthy when my dad was cooking all the time. But as they got older, it became more difficult, and they would start to rely on frozen dinners and things like that, which were really low quality, but they were cheap and they were easy. And so the quality of the nutrition that they were taking in had really been compromised. And I think that's true of a lot of elderly, because it becomes a little bit about budget and about how difficult it is to cook for yourself. Making a whole foods diet from scratch is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. So just starting off and making change gradually and slowly. So even though when my mom got here, I wanted to just completely overhaul everything. I've been trying to go a little slower. Like, I started out with just foods that she was comfortable with, and then I started to make improvements on them and improve the quality, swap things out, and just gradually just go slowly so her body could adjust. And also adding in, I think a lot of people with compromised digestive systems, they need certain supplements like probiotics, prebiotics, digestive enzymes. And so we started there with that.
Awesome. And I know that clearly, generally speaking, we all know that this is a healthier and happier lifestyle. But can you tell us like more specifically, what are the key benefits or the key changes to this lifestyle that people would notice in themselves?
Oh, sure. I mean, most people will report, feeling better moods, more energy, mental clarity. You take away the sugar and the processed foods, just that one step, and your brain fog kind of disappears, and you start to think more clearly and be more focused. Um, Clear skin, healthy hair, healthy nails. These are all signs. Better sleep, better digestion. So it's, and when you start to feel these changes, you're more motivated to continue. You're like, wow, I feel really good right now. Steady energy throughout the day, where so a lot of people have that mid-afternoon slump where they need sugar or caffeine to get through the day. You stop feeling like that. You stop having cravings for sugar. You start to crave healthier food. Your taste buds come alive. Like when you're eating sugar and processed foods all the time, your taste buds are like dead. So you don't really taste the nuances in different foods. All of a sudden, it feels like your food starts to come alive. You're like, wow, that tastes really good. And because you're not eating sugar all the time, which deadens your taste buds. So it's like waking up to a whole new world.
Wow, waking up to a whole new world. Like you're getting me excited right now to some vegetables or fruits or something. I
You
feel
could
like,
whip out the juicer after our phone call.
honestly, I've even gone into, I tell Janine this all the time. Like I've been trying to get into like smoothies and right now I'm just kind of sticking with like frozen fruit and whatnot. But hearing this information, like it really makes me want to go the whole 9 yards and just dedicate. I'm loving this. You're convincing me 100%.
That's great.
But as we're talking, we know a proper diet is so important. So, are there any, food facts that you haven't said so far yet that you think we should all be more aware of, or especially anything that might help, like brain health?
Yeah, well, with brain health, especially if you want to, whether you have dementia or whether you want to prevent dementia, proper diet is essential. I mean, there are way too many people in the world right now that have dementia, and it's, I think a lot of it is preventable. So starting out at a young age with good healthy eating habits is really important. But in particular, so I said starting out by healing the gut for brain health, um, essential fatty acids, things like avocados, things that are like healthy fats. Fat gets a bad rap, but fat is really essential for brain health. So like avocado and coconut, chia seeds, flaxseed, hemp seed, things like that. We use those things a lot. Um, um, lots of fruits and vegetables, obviously, high fiber diet, whole foods, all organic if possible. Those are all tips. And then I also use, one thing I didn't touch on really yet, are essential oils too. So essential oils that I'm using for my mom, we do some to help balance her digestive system. I use some oils that'll help her after a meal to just not have nausea or diarrhea or constipation. They just help to balance you out. Some oils we're using for her immune system, to support her immune system so she doesn't catch any viruses that are going around. And then I use some oils that are good for supporting cognitive function, improving focus, and brain health. So it's kind of like everything is all combined. It's not just like there's one thing. That's why I call it the detox lifestyle, because it's a lot of different factors. There's not one magical food to eat. There's not one magical essential oil. They all work in tandem together, and you want to have a varied approach.
Wow, I love that. And I want to kind of touch back to, because you shared your story with us, and you were authentic with that. And so to go through that and to be kind of living your experience with your parents, self-care has to be a huge priority for you. And you've mentioned a lot of the things that you've already started to do so far. But do you have any key self-care tips that you'd like to share with everyone?
Sure. I mean, self-care for me, it's challenging right now because with my mom here full time and I don't have help with her. So my previous self-care routine, I had to adjust. And so adaptability for me is the number one rule with self-care. But sometimes you may not have like a block of a 2 or 3 hour block of time for self-care, but you can break it down. Like I break it down throughout the day and take small breaks right now because that fits into my day better. So, and for me, self-care, being in nature is the most, it's where I get the most benefit from. So if I just go outside and I put my bare feet on the ground and sit down and meditate for 5 minutes on the ground outside, I feel much better. My stress dissipates. I use like a small routine at night before I go to bed, self-massage of the bottoms of my feet with essential oils, like calming essential oils, breathing them in, rubbing the back of my neck, like just a quick self-massage, turning off social media for, any kind of screen time before bed, and just like setting up a quiet space, have your diffuser going, maybe read a book, or just something that's very nurturing to ensure a good night's sleep. And in the morning, some kind of movement, like either if I can't go out and walk my dog, I can just go out on the back deck and throw the ball around with her, do some stretching, do some light yoga out there, some breath work. So it's whatever makes you feel good, actually. I mean, self-care is going to be different for everybody, but I think combining some kind of movement with some kind of breath, with being out in nature, anybody can do it. And, it takes, whether you have 5 minutes or an hour, but you have to prioritize making yourself feel good, especially in trying times like we're in right now.
And I know you're an expert, so I shouldn't feel so impressed with that, but I just am, just the way you broke all that down, especially starting with how adaptability is key, because I think even for myself, we forget that like things change, moods change, we change, and we need different, processes sometimes to help deal with our self-care. So, thank you for that. I know you're an expert, so it's like, it is what you do, but it's still so impressive to me. But I want to ask you some of our ending questions here at Flawless that we like to ask everyone is really, what does flawless mean to you? And another way to look at that is, how do you see the perfection in everyone? So yeah, I just want to ask, like, what does the word flawless mean for you?
Well, to see the perfection in everybody, I think everybody has a unique gift that they bring to the world. And when you are with somebody, especially when you're with them in person, and you can really be present with them, you can discover what that gift is. So, and sometimes we don't know what our own gifts are, but when you're present with somebody else, and they're actually paying attention to what you're saying, and they're happy to be in your space, they're enjoying your energy, it makes that person feel worthy, right? And I think a lot of people just don't feel worthy, but we are all worthy human beings that have a divine gift that we're bringing to this lifetime. And so I think just really taking the time to be present with somebody, listen to what they're saying, look in their eyes, smile. We are all, we're flawless because we're all imperfect.
I love that. And it kind of brings it back to one of your original quotes, how you're really focusing on quality over quantity. So just spending that little bit of time with someone, that quality time is flawless. So I love that. And then really my last question for you is kind of a similar concept. We also like to ask people, what's giving you hope right now for a more flawless world?
What gives me hope is seeing, like right now I have 3 young adult children, and my youngest daughter just graduated from high school. And what gives me hope is seeing her and her friends on how, they've had pretty tough year. They missed out on most of their senior year, but it hasn't gotten them down. They're all still so hopeful about their future. They're excited about their future. And even though they're facing a world that's dramatically different than what we thought they would be facing at this time, the fact that they are so enthusiastic and they're not going to let anything get them down, that to me gives me hope, because they're our younger generation and they're going to make a lot of good, positive change happen in this world. So I'm very hopeful when I watch them.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Carol, for joining us and not only giving all of your expert advice on healing and nutrition and whatnot, but then also just taking the time to be authentic and vulnerable with us and sharing your story and your relationship with your mother and father. So I appreciate you for being open about that. And if you want more from Carol, we will make sure, as always, to make sure we link her descriptions, her social media descriptions in the bio and in the video as well. But for now, thank you so much, Carol, for joining us.
Thank you, Trey. Thanks for having me.